Well, first of all, I think we should give a little round of applause for Christina and MHTBA. And then our friends at Glacier Bank for making this possible. And last but not least, Endpoint for doing all this. They're not actually, right now they have just secured a big deal.
Recording in progress.
In Missoula, so they're going to be joining us a little bit, but I think we should give a virtual round of applause for them. When they come in, they'll have big smiles on their faces. So my name is Mickeli. I'm going to be your kind of captain on this journey as your moderator. And what I always like to do is just make all these kind of this a conversation, a dialogue. This isn't a presentation. This is meant to be a conversation. So if you guys can just lower that guard, we're going to lower ours. We're going to have some questions, right? And we're going to ask this brilliant panel that I'll introduce in a second. But if you feel like, hey, I have a thought on that, or could you clarify, or I'm going through something right now that you could maybe help with, that'd be great. I've been building businesses and working remote for 10 years, so this is a kind of a topic that I'm passionate about. But I know you guys are in different spots, so please feel welcome to interject at any point. You guys cool with that? Great. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is, before we jump into the questions, is let the panel, I could do my own version, but half of you guys haven't met, unfortunately, the other half I have. So I'm going to have them do kind of your own introduction, maybe your story, take a couple minutes, your story, kind of your background, your company, what you do, anything else you want to share. You want to kick it out?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So Kate Mayer, hi everybody. My background is pretty much 100% working in IT, mostly in go-to-market strategy, product management, partner management. My current role is with a global solutions integrator based out of Phoenix called Insight. And I actually have a lot to do with kind of our go-to-market strategy for modern work. So my perspective today is both kind of as a remote worker and from hearing from clients with what they're going through in trying to support a workforce that is hybrid.
Hi, I'm Rachel Thompson, live in Whitefish and 2 kids, so working mom, and came to Whitefish during the pandemic. That kind of forced remote work to happen, and then I made that a formal arrangement during the pandemic before it really became common. And I work in legal technology for a startup that's based out of Chicago. Prior to that, I worked in large law firms, so coming at it from the perspective of the legal industry.
Nice. Hi, I'm Gregg Barrett, so I'm CEO of WaterStreet company. We're a local Montana software company. We have about 90 employees. I've spent my whole life in some version of software and operations for different companies. Maybe the other company you might have heard of was back in the day, National Flood Services. I'm one of the guys that moved National Flood Services to Kalispell, I don't even know how long ago now. And we do enterprise software for the financial services industry. And we use Insight.
So hello everyone, I'm Kelly Schwager and I live in Columbia Falls. Also work very closely with Christina as part of the board for the Tech Alliance. I have been working remote since 2015. So I like to say I was doing it before it was like the hip thing. But the thing that's been so fascinating during the pandemic is 100% of my team worldwide is now remote. By day, I run global communications for Oracle. And so during the pandemic, we also moved our corporate headquarters from the Bay Area in California to a dual headquarters setup in Austin and in Nashville. So as part of today's discussion, can certainly talk about how we've approached work from home and the remote setup, how we've approached hybrid, and also from a recruiting perspective, especially for the early professionals, what we're seeing from early career employees and their desire or not to work from home.
Awesome. Well, thank you. A little round of applause. Well, I'm Mickeli Bedore, and as much as I love doing moderating, happy to help anytime. I do have a job. So I've been in, for 20 years, I've been helping companies. My superpower is finding the quickest path to opportunity. So I had a chance to do that for some of the biggest companies in the world, IBM, Oracle, Verizon, so on and so forth, and helping them find territories that weren't turning or products that weren't being sold and turn them into profit centers. for the past 8 to 9 years, I got a chance to do that for small to medium-sized businesses, including startups, most recently with my friends over at Endpoint. And basically what we do is we want to make sure that our 3 pillars of growth, which is you're finding your right target audience that needs your product and service right now, the right kind of brand messaging to help communicate with them and create kind of awareness, and then the mechanics to reach them. And out of the businesses that we've started, the media company, the business brokerage, and most recently a marketing and business development company, we've done that all remote. So again, like I said, this is a passionate subject of mine. But no one's here, you're not here to listen to me. I want to hear from you guys, and maybe Greg, if you could start, maybe maybe during and post-pandemic, kind of the shifts that you've seen in the workplace, whether it be a full-on remote, hybrid, and kind of how you've tackled the new now.
Sure. So we were about 70-30 remote prior. Being in software, working from home is old news. And that was working pretty well. And what it forced us into, I don't even know how long ago, 8 or 9 years ago, is we began working right away on our team approach, on our metrics, and we went through a lot of pains. We went pure agile, where it's just this really open world of everybody's supposed to be accountable on the team. And that worked pretty well for us because there was no pressure, right? And we were at 90 employees, you're small enough to pivot. And we had done a ton of that. And then we started working more into what's our definition of success. This manager thing isn't working, so our managers have to be on the team and contributing to the team. Nobody's over the team. And we started working a lot more with people, process, technology, and just focusing on making improvements. So we have all this energy going into the team for performance metrics. And so that saved us in the pandemic. We panicked in the pandemic for about 2 weeks. Everybody went home. We lost quality of service a little bit, not bad. And we made it through just fine. I think mostly because of all that teamwork before. We weren't surprised by it. Our IT performed flawlessly. They got 5 stars. And so that one, but what I saw as a CEO is there was a big shift in the thinking. Everybody wants to be home now.
Yep.
And so what we've been wrestling with since then is the same things all of you guys are, is okay, training, how are we doing with training? Okay, well, you're coming in-house for training. Then you go out. And we had tons of experiences that said that was the right decision. I don't know that that's the final decision, but anybody that worked on site in a team for more than about 2 years and then went remote, we had people that we loved that went remote for family reasons, health reasons, all kinds of things in prior decades, didn't miss a beat, right? We hire somebody from Virginia or New York or somewhere and they've never been in our office, rough.
Gotcha.
So we kind of carved that out. Then from there, it's just dealing with the creative side. And I know you guys are all well read on that, but we have a lot of people that do widget work, repetitive work. That we don't have any problem on metrics. We don't have any problem on communication. But client-facing things, quality of service issues, and anything that's creative, design-oriented, which is about half our staff, is a lot tougher. And that's what I struggle with the most, is that particular area, is the creative side. And we're working on it, but it's a journey.
Katie, can you bounce off that? Being in the creative space, being in the marketing space, being an employee, but also a boss, and does that resonate?
I think you hit on something really important, which is that technology is the enabler of modern work, but having how do your teams collaborate? How do they communicate? How do you create that experience remotely, which is never going to be quite like it is in person, right? And so there's some areas of the business that you have to get really creative on what that looks like, right? And I think you hit on something else really important too, which is that onboarding now, I think, is one of the most challenging things for fully remote employees, where you're going to hire them, bring them on board, and you've never met in person. And so how do you make that a really good experience for them, you know, from a technology perspective, so that when they're getting their equipment, it's on, it's provisioned, it works, it's effective, they can be productive right away, right? But then too, like, how do you integrate them into the culture? How do you kind of create that team and that collaboration and, you know, the working style, right? So that there has to be a lot of like thought and kind of work that goes into that piece of it for sure.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, in our company, we have such a bandwidth of people. So to your point, if we were to hire a remote person that's doing some type of support, customer service, you know, it could even be client interfacing, but let's say
Right.
level 1 or level 2 stuff.
Right.
We've got pretty good curriculum for onboarding, pretty good training there, metrics there, easy because it's task oriented. We can bring those guys on.
Yeah.
But we have a full R&D team that's 10 people, and then we got about another 10 that are similar, doing really, I mean, it's just all iterative, creative. You throw it at the wall, you try it, you get rid of it. You know, any time of day or night. And
Yeah.
that one's the one I cannot figure out.
It's because
hard.
there's something that's that intangible piece about being in person in a creative environment and being able to whiteboard something
Right.
out, right?
Right.
So there's really good collaboration tools for that, and you can get pretty close, you know. But I
Right.
think too, it's about you know, really using different methods for collaboration. Like we talk about brainstorming, right? There's kind of this concept I've read about that it's called brain writing, where instead of having people all speak in a meeting, which sometimes can be two people that are pretty opinionated on something potentially, and then others don't get maybe a chance, right? To have people submit ideas, you know, anonymously and remotely first, and then you have a collaboration session, so that it's some things, you know, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, but yeah, it's
a journey.
It's a journey for sure.
Right on.
Yeah.
Kelly, Rachel, you want to add?
Yeah, I can definitely build on that. So we've become very deliberate in how we think about remote workers, and one of the things we think about first is access. And so, you know, to your point of, you know, from that moment of onboarding, making sure that things just work, but also down to, you know, when you've been at a company a long time, you are it's like you call, you know, phone a friend. You have your network. And so how, as new employees are being onboarded in a remote world, do you make sure that they have the same level of access to information, the same opportunities to build those networks? Even things as simple as in meetings. You know, while Zoom does afford the opportunity to have larger group meetings than maybe you would have in an office setting, are you recording it if appropriate? Are you taking notes? Are you making sure that those who need access to that information are still getting it to be able to do their jobs, especially if they're newer to the organization? We also think a lot about norms and making sure that we're very deliberate about the norms that we're setting across the team. Because again, when you're working together in an office every day, norms kind of evolve, and you can have norms that emerge that are unspoken. But when you're in a 100% remote situation, particularly during COVID, we were very deliberate about setting norms for teams, especially new teams that were forming, and then checking in too, to make sure that those norms were being followed. And then, you know, tools and kind of dialect are two other things that we think a lot about. So imagine you're in a Zoom setting, you've got your phone a friend network of folks that you talk to. Well, there's back conversation going on via text all the time. Being conscious of what's being said in a meeting and what's not being said, or what's being spoken via another form of communication. We think about that a lot. And, you know, to the point of what's not being said, making sure that if someone's not speaking up in a remote type conversation, whoever's kind of quote unquote moderating, making sure that there's an opportunity to say, hey, you know, if you have something to add, use the chat. If you have a question, use the Q&A function, or specifically calling out to make sure that folks that you know have a point of view on something are given the opportunity to talk.
Oh gosh, there's so many topics there. I do think that there's a difference too between fully remote and then some people working remotely when they want and then coming in. So that's kind of a different dynamic. But I work on a team that is 100% remote. We are all remote. There is no office. And I think that actually is how one of the biggest reasons that it's so successful is that no one feels like they're missing out or they're being left out, or that there are other conversations happening kind of in the halls. One thing that I find very interesting about remote work is like we're kind of all looking at this probably from the same generation, and as we're hiring new people, a lot of the people we're bringing on are Gen Z or very young millennials. And it's very interesting to see how they self-select into wanting to be fully remote and thinking that that is, the norm. And their expectations are different, much different than someone who I worked in a law firm where we dressed up 5 days a week. There was not even jeans on Fridays. So I'm looking at it from a different perspective, like, how things used to be versus how they are now.
Yeah, it's actually one of the reasons. So we relocated our corporate headquarters from the Bay Area to the dual setup with Austin and Nashville, like I mentioned. And one of the reasons that we did that was for that very reason. As we surveyed early career professionals that we were hoping to recruit into the company, a lot of them do want a hybrid or an office setup. And the 3 cities that they were most interested in were Seattle, Nashville, and Austin. And so the fact that we now have a presence in Austin and Nashville has really, really helped bring those employees on board. And a lot of them will opt to be, full-time in office 5 days a week as they're starting with the company, as they're taking advantage of the training programs. So yeah, thinking about the different needs.
And that looks different than it did when I was starting out, so that's just because there's a different generational mix, and it's, I don't know, like much more casual. Or you were talking about kind of the collaboration. I mean, I've worked where everyone has an office, and then when everyone has open plan, and like that's a completely different experience too. So I think as people return to the office, if they do, that just looks different as well, especially with some of your coworkers staying remote.
Again, dialogue, throw in, raise hands, but I'm going to pick on you too just a little bit because you said something very, very interesting. You said, Kelly, it sounds like it's a mix of both, so you have experience in both, and as you, Rachel, is that you said something where there's people that are like, this is my first time going remote. I don't know how to engage. I don't know when to interject, like you said, like I don't feel comfortable. And then there's people that are like, I've only done remote, and the people that are coming up. So can you just kind of educate us on the best practices that you've seen to kind of bridge that gap? Because I've seen it too, where it's like, I'm scared of this. I don't even know how to turn, why is the lighting, they're taking video in front of a window and you can't see them, and sound and stuff like that. Can you guys just kind of riff on that?
Yeah, I mean, as silly as it sounds, like we have programs for people, as part of onboarding. It's like how to set up your home office to be, Zoom ready. Even for some of our executives who've been with the company a long time, as we were entering the pandemic, one of the things that we did was again, make sure that they've got the setup that, you think about things like if you wear a crazy tie when you're on camera, sometimes it can, do weird things and not look great. So keep it simple, lighting, and that's stuff that none of us have had to, really think about. You don't think about being camera ready for your job. And so stuff like that, or, again, those folks like managers or people who are moderating conversations, making sure that they are conscious of, again, the unspoken, and that they think to ask the question, or, think to provide ways for people to contribute that isn't, like Christina, like putting you on the spot in a call, but saying, hey, if you have something to add, you can drop it in the Zoom, or raise your hand by pushing this button. So the training and just being open and making it okay for people to not be a pro at Slack or Zoom, or pick your favorite Rike, or pick your favorite collaboration tool. Because I'll be the first to admit, I had no idea what a Rike was until the pandemic. I'm like, what is that? Slack? How do I Slack? So we try to offer training and support.
Yeah, I came into the startup that I work for now from a large law firm that, is kind of like a dinosaur. And it was like very funny to my coworkers because I didn't know how to, I had only used a PC, I hadn't used an Apple, I was constantly clicking the wrong things, I wasn't, and it did take time, and it is a learning curve because I was trying to explain recently to someone older than I am how I do a call with a client, and you have, your screen open and you're talking to this client, but you're also taking notes in HubSpot, and then someone is sending you a message, and maybe there's someone else, like you said, making notes in the chat to the group, but then they're also messaging you. And it is so different than being in person. And it is also, I think, much more exhausting. And so it's also like building in that time to almost like be off that I don't think I always needed when it was in person.
Yeah. How about, anything you want to add? I mean,
Well, that you hit on a really interesting point. I think there's lots of studies now, but the increase in number of meetings since going remote, I think it's like 1,000-fold. It's some ridiculous number, right? And probably everyone in this room can say, yeah, I feel that. So that I think is such an important point, because it's almost like, it's kind of this default to meet now, right? In an attempt to kind of stay collaborative and give visibility and, all of those things. When it's not, when an actual meeting is not maybe always needed, right? So really understanding kind of and looking at that, I think, is another important piece, so that it doesn't feel necessarily so exhausting. Because I agree with you, you're always on 5 or 6 different collaboration tools during a meeting. It's a lot, it's a lot for sure.
Yeah, it's okay to pick up the phone.
Yeah, it's a good one.
What's interesting is I feel like oftentimes it is women that and I don't mean to stereotype, but just my experience has been that it's a lot of times my coworkers who are also working moms or whatever. I think there have been studies about women spending a lot of time looking at their own appearance on camera on Zoom, feeling maybe insecure or focusing on how they're looking or reacting, and that it is more exhausting for that gender. And I do think it's interesting, because I have noticed a lot of my friends who are, they're at pickup and they're working and then they're making that call quickly, just, and that's like a whole nother thing, about dividing up household responsibilities. But I have noticed is that there's less of a desire to be on camera and to be, having meetings over Zoom when it could be a text or a call.
So then, to that point, how do you engage? Like, most communication is nonverbal, right? Like, I gotta tell you, I hate Zoom calls with more than 5 people and nobody's on camera. I'm like, what are we doing?
That's a really good point.
How much money am I wasting in this meeting right now?
Yeah, the camera
Sounds
piece
very
is
CEO.
Interesting.
Now that's interesting.
I just want to get stuff done. I don't want to be on a Zoom call for 45 minutes. I want 20 minutes. Let's roll. What do you got?
Yeah, well, we had conference calls for years, right? Before you had Zoom, before you were looking at everybody.
Equally horrible,
Okay.
right? It's a little thing like this, although this is way cool.
Yeah.
And everybody's talking over everybody, and it's horrible. At least now, I think there is more, to your point, where people go on and off camera and it's accepted. And I think the moderation piece is much better in a meeting. I will say that's a positive out of all of this. Is I don't get on these calls or Zoom meetings or whatever where somebody's running the show. Nobody else is contributing. It's much more balanced. I'm not saying some people don't need help speaking up,
Sure.
but it's really evolved rapidly.
Yeah, and I think that's where the norms come in, because there are absolutely some meetings where it's like you want cameras on. Like, that should just be a norm. But there are other ones where it's like if you've got 150 people on there, like maybe it's just the presenter that's...
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you're doing one-way stuff, that's completely different. But
Yeah.
if you are really genuinely trying to get a discussion topic, engagement, get something going, I mean, you need to be looking at that person, and they need to be looking at you and saying, oh, what about this? It needs to be dynamic. And that's the kind of, that's what I search for.
any challenges that we've missed? I mean, we've talked about collaboration, we've talked about kind of, I want to get into the bad habits, but, some bad habits that maybe have kind of crept in, and the evolution that we are now, which is maybe a hybrid. And if we have to go back, are we ready for that? Have we developed such bad habits that we'll just, like basic business acumen is way back here, pre-pandemic? Is there any challenges that we missed that you guys are seeing, that you're facing, that maybe our panel can help with?
I'm interested in the details of being fully remote and hiring people like directly out of college. So there's no office, there's nowhere to go train. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I don't know, like, I feel like sometimes people are basically interviewing in what I would consider their pajamas, and that's like surprising for me, because they're like what? Was I supposed to wear something else? You know, and I'm like, oh, okay. Is this your childhood bedroom behind you? So I do think there's.
You're right on.
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's just because they're, very early career or beginning career,
Yeah.
right? And it's very different from showing up at an office at 8 and being there till 5 and being there all day and all of that. So I think it's sort of, I think every organization, it's expectation setting, right, on the front end in terms of like, what does remote work look like? Does that look like we expect 40 hours a week and it's these time periods? Is it that you have core working hours and they're, I've kind of heard of that concept in a few places. Every organization's a bit different around it. And then I think too, providing opportunities to be in person at some point, because that's helpful as well. We do a lot of like team building remotely, as much as we can to kind of bring that connection point there, especially with new grads. I think I have 3 or 4 on my team now that graduated in May. So this is their first, working experience, full-time working experience. But I do see, they do have an interest and a desire to also, be in person at some point. Yeah.
I think that is a great question. We flat out stopped hiring college. We would go to every show at the Montana universities and try to get 1 to 2 Montana grads every year into our program, right? Well, that's easy when they're just driving up, coming on site. And so with the pandemic, we were like, oh, how are we slaying this? So we haven't tackled that yet. And it's on our list, and all we can keep coming up with is we have to get really aggressive about just tearing apart our onboarding. Are we hiring somebody that's all they do is onboard? We're only 90 people, so you're looking at it going, how do we slay this? But some of our best success has come from the mixture in culture, which is another concern I have, that comes from having those young professionals in with some of the older groups, and we just get such a better dynamic in the office, and I absolutely love it, right? The creativity. We push a lot of ideas. We're all about the whole team. So everybody's got a good idea. It's in there, right? And so I missed that. We're only about 2 years of being shut down on that, but our approach is going to be, we've got 2 new people that I think are going to help in the training, and we're going to just tear apart our onboarding and just go like scheduled, like training, because they're raw, right? Way different than hiring somebody that's like 5 years out of school. Way.
Is this like a training in person, on site, even if they're remote? Are you ever
Well,
just bringing everyone together?
In the context of the question from the gentleman, we have an office, so we would just bring them in. Mm-hmm. But if I was more like you, I would be doing remote training. I'd be trying to figure out how to slay remote training, which I think is it's trickier than I think than people realize.
I think you have to have these like all in person, all hands meetings to punctuate, maybe each quarter, a couple times a year, because it does make a difference being in person.
Yeah,
Even if you were an all remote company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say one thing that we did, our internship program this year in the US was 100% remote. And so these are students that are still in school. And so what we did with them is they were all assigned 2 buddies. One that was a early career professional, and then one that had been at the company for some time. So they always had this pair that they could kind of ask questions, bounce things off of, and that worked pretty well.
I like that. We do peer programming with new programmers, and it is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it worked.
That's what I was going to kind of ask now. I have so many questions that I want to ask, and I'm respectful of this. But just from habits, do you know what I mean? Habits that have developed over this time from people that were always in person, and now people that are coming up that are like, this is what I want. Because even we had a media company, we were hiring people, and it was like, do you really want to work remote because you want to be more efficient? Or do you want to work remote because you don't want to work? Do you know what I mean? And I know that's kind of open-ended, but I'd love to hear some solutions of maybe how you guys, and we're not all putting you guys on the spot to have all the answers for this. In fact, if anyone else does, jump in. But that was something that I saw in my travels is, man, there's some bad habits being developed that I'm developing, that my peers and colleagues on my team are developing, and then people that we're hiring, do people want to work remote for the right reasons? Can they work remote?
Yeah,
is there such a thing as, can you work remote?
Yeah, I think that's the really important question. I'm finding that we are hiring harder. Meaning that we are, like, the interview process to now get a job is much longer and much more detailed, because that's what we're looking for. Can you work remote? Like,
We're
do you-
still,
yeah.
every single person interviews the candidate, which, like, whoa, that's a lot of interviews. That's,
Yeah.
and kind of to your point about like the increase in meetings.
Yeah.
But that's also like part of the culture. Then everyone comes together to decide. And there's not that many people in that company, so. But still, it's a lot. It's still a lot to have every single person talking to them.
It's tough, if you work from home and you don't have the personality for it, you've lost all structure if you were in the office, right? And so now you have to have discipline, right? So that's not every person, right? That's actually a small percentage of people. So it is tough. Yeah.
How do you coach on that? And again, I keep looking at you because you're kind of the perfect vantage point to me to look
That's
at.
too bad. Yeah, I
Otherwise,
picked
it's
the
really
wrong
bright.
chair again.
Kelly's like, dodged the bullet again because I can't see you. I know you're there. That's bright out there. Do you guys have any, like,
Here's what we do, and this is, I do a lot of walking and talking, like too many days a week thinking about this darn topic. And what we always come back to, one of us will bring the other one back off the edge, right? We're going to do something here. And what we keep coming back to is our performance metrics. So because our teams are safe, because everybody's on the team, because we completely support each team, the managers in the team, their pay is structured on team success, which is based on client success, right? All of that, right? So we have so much work in that area, so much equity in that area, so to speak, that when somebody goes remote, it's difficult for them to get off track for very long. So quicker course corrections. And the reason for that is all their metrics they agreed to. Yeah, we're in. It's part of their one-on-ones. We do monthly one-on-ones. It's published. Everybody can see everybody's performance. Everybody can see the team performance. And it's not just like widget stuff. It's qualitative as well. And so that helps us with that person that's remote. I'm not saying we haven't had some problems. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been at the bank, Glacier Bank actually, or the grocery store or somewhere, and I'll see a team member and it's 2:00 and I'm like, so you're shopping with your family right now? But I'll be darned if I don't go check the metrics and stuff's getting done. So I'm like, okay, I gotta walk back off that one. And that's probably, if I had to make one statement about what's held us together on the remote thing from keeping things from getting too loose, it's that.
Gotcha.
More out of dumb luck than, we didn't see the pandemic coming, so.
It's an interesting point about, like you said, are you disciplined? Because you either are or you aren't, right? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some coaches.
Or you're too disciplined. Like my problem, I work from home. What happens? The laptop's back on. That to me is the other problem that nobody talks about. Is how do you disconnect? Like,
Get over pivots.
I'm trying to figure out if like we're going to take Christmas off the week between New Year's and Christmas. I'm trying to get more disconnection done because our people work hard, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? What do you do for the people that are on site? Do you go to a 4-day work week? It's not really fair to be on site 5 days a week when Bob and Sue can both do what they want. So that whole on-site thing's tricky too.
Is compensation different for people who come into the office?
We do it by job function and all that. So we thought about that. Like, do you pay people more to come in the office? And we never really landed on like, how do I do that with it still being considered fair, right?
And you've been hiring too. I mean, have you seen, to Greg's point, have you seen burnout? Because I know, like, when I was in corporate prior to going, I was working remote at IBM, and then I jumped ship and went on my own. I felt burnout because I was like you. I was like, I'm going to win. I'm going to be the best. Even though, I was an employee, I still wanted to win and be the best. Have you seen this too?
Yeah, I think that's the other side of the equation, right? Is that if it's always with you and it's always available and it's here and it's there and it's, all of that, you have to, I think people have to really like create their own boundaries about what they're, when they're going to be available, what they're going to respond to, and everyone does it differently. I work with some people who they shut down at 5:00 and, they come back on at 8:00 the next morning, and that is what they do. And they let people know about that. And then there's others, right, who are in and out all night responding to all sorts of things. So I think it's, but the burnout piece I think is very real in a remote work environment because it is always on. And, you know, to Greg, to your point, like you're trying to take a vacation, like what do I turn off? How do I, you know, that's, yeah, it's a lot to balance.
Yeah, we had to, on that vacation, that's funny. Yeah, I had a person say, yeah, I'm available. I'm like, are you available? Because right now Facebook says you're on the beach. And so, you know, I talked to her and I'm like, hey, listen, you can work from home. We'll pay you to work from home, but we're not paying for the vacation. We had a really, because we do so much communication, I just talk I love my whole team. We just talk about it. It's like, hey, so that's not cool. You got to have separation here. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And what came out of that was we decided, you know what, we need some rules. We don't have any rules from work from home, right?
Yeah.
So we have them initial off on all the rules. You will have a workspace that meets this criteria. Work from home, you know, everything from
Right.
a workspace to what you can't do. No dress code. We're jeans every day.
Right.
So that helped I'd say setting expectations when somebody works remote, like part of that onboarding, I think would go a long ways.
Did you have a thought over there?
He was at,
Yeah.
he's been asking.
So, being at, you know, I'm a SaaS company, and we're kind of in a growing phase where we're trying to more or less compare and contrast. Maybe some of the any panel member could chime in on this. We're trying to compare and contrast this notion of the gig economy and the freelancer versus making the transition into a paid position, full-time position in a remote format. Any observations on that, comparing and contrasting the psychology of an individual who maybe is a freelancer, a gig worker versus, you know, a full-time mindset, so to speak?
Great question.
So
I think part-time is like a scam because I think you end up working full-time. Like the part-time, you know, maybe the expectations are less, but from what I've seen, anytime someone tries to maybe go 80 hours, or excuse me, 80% of their pay, 4 days a week or something like that, they end up working that other day. You know, just in little ways, but.
Yeah, because I know, you know, Upwork, for example, has, you know, this format where you can hire people on an hourly basis.
Yeah.
And you can actually monitor their screen time, and I mean, there's really, real accountability there. You know, but I guess what I'm driving at is what do you guys perceive as the psychological difference with someone who maybe has a skill set and is marketing that skill set in a gig type environment or a freelancer type environment versus someone who wants to go to work, you know, full-time for an organization and apply their skills that way?
I'm going to jump in on that. So we have two people right now that fit that criteria, but they're specialists, right? So we hire a lot of people, whether they're contract or employee, doesn't matter, whether they're on-site or remote, doesn't matter, but they're doing they'd be like a regular developer or a regular analyst or a regular marketing people. And I know there's different levels, but as soon as you get too specialized, like we've got one guy out of Spokane right now that is just, he did a ton of work on our data factory and our ETL process and just kept going with the data models, and now he's helping us with AI, right? And so we do him, he kind of, his hours float up and down, but he's kind of close to that category you're talking about. And then we picked up another person, and again, it's like that combination of expertise and credentials that really makes a difference for that gig. And we would hire it every time from this lady out of California because she is wired up, has all the credentials, and she's helping us on some of our branding, getting published, marketing, stuff that we could never pull off. I could hire 10 employees and I could not pull off that level, right? But I get her, right, for pennies compared to what, I don't even know that I could replicate what she knows and who she knows. So we've just, it's an interesting question because we've just started dabbling in that. Normally we're like full-time worker, you know, linear stuff. And yeah, I think there's a future in that. Plus, you can tap anybody now, right? Everybody's mind's open. You don't care where they live or what country they're from.
The thing about that mindset, you said mindset, and this isn't a good either or. I have found that we've hired a ton of gig economists or whatever you want to call them, as we have W-2, but I found those people we were talking about that are checking their phones all the time, that are working around the clock, those are generally what you're going to get when you hear a gig economist. They can't help themselves, and I don't think, people think, oh, gig economists because they want to have more vacation, they can live wherever, but they're always working. That's what I see.
Yeah, they're somewhere between passion and
Yeah,
obsessed.
it's just a different mindset. You asked about mindset specifically, and that's what I've seen.
Yeah.
That type of worker, if there's any rule of thumb that you guys have found.
And they're usually pretty equipped and good at being remote because they've been doing it. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Now, are they perfect at, if you needed them to go be on an enterprise, business?
Yeah, they don't want
engagement?
the day to day.
I think that's a good point. It's like in specialized functions or they can be really deep dive specialists. I think it kind of depends on the role, because if you're looking for someone to bring on who is going to serve more as a generalist, right, on your team, I don't know. I mean, potentially it could work. I haven't done it, but I think when I think of gig, that's what I think of, is like more deeper dive specialists, right, who have a lot of experience, a lot of different industries, and are kind of bringing that forward.
We've always liked a hybrid of W-2 team players, people that want to be a part of the team. You know what I mean? That team is important to them.
Yeah.
And then the specialists, that specialty is important to them and the outcome of said specialty. You know what I mean? Understanding that psyche and then leveraging both of them together, because the employee, the team player, will hold that person accountable, make them part of the team, but also hold them accountable as if they were, because they can't help themselves because that's their mindset. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to be the moderator. You guys, any other thoughts?
No, it's fine.
I've hired a lot, but good perspective there.
Other questions on that line?
Gallup's done a lot of research on employee engagement, and they generally found there's been substantial decline in employee engagement since the pandemic began. There's a lot of different causes for that, but one of the speculations is that managers just aren't able to keep employees emotionally engaged in their workplaces. And then from a management perspective, how do you create that emotional engagement with your workforce that's remote?
That's a good question. Wow.
Yeah. I would say you have to be deliberate.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time with managers, reminding them that, hey, all the time that you used to spend, grabbing someone to, go get a quick cup of coffee, walking down the hall, getting lunch, like, you need to be deliberate about doing that with your remote workers, because if anything, you need to be doing it more in this setting. So yeah, we've experienced it. We've seen, in certain cases, managers that have pulled back, and their teams, they disengage and sometimes will leave the company, and it's unfortunate because a lot of times it comes down to the manager keeping them connected.
I also think it's how you look at work now. Like, if that's where you get your community and your friendships, and I feel like my parents' generation, probably a lot of people met their spouse at work, and that was one of the biggest changes when I did go fully remote. I felt like, I almost felt like a pull to, like, I should work locally. I should find a job that's local, because I'm missing that community that work was giving me. And instead, I ended up just getting involved in things locally and having that connection. So it's like I rely on that. Like, I think we all need that kind of connection, but I don't rely on work for that like I did. It's just kind of happened organically.
I think there's a big distinction. It's a great question, because everybody is disconnected, no question, right? If you're in a career, I think that's one segment of the answer, versus if you're just doing repetitive work, right? Then why would work be your number one? It's not from the very get-go, right? We've tried to do all the things everybody else does, like, hey, we're doing a group event, hey, we're playing games, it's summer, come in, everybody come in. And what we found is people will come and go. Like, we buy lunch on Wednesdays for the whole staff, cater it in. And then now I went to breakfasts on Monday. Guess how many people came in and got their breakfast and went back home? Classic. Disconnected, right? So, do you want the managers to do more? Yes. So what we're trying now is teams, right? We're big on teams. So we're trying to do a quarterly thing where that team's not just together for an hour or two. They're coming in for the week. which is horribly expensive. But we're having them fly in and we're hanging out, they're going to dinner, and then at the end of the week, they're usually trying to go do something, go for a hike or something like that. You know, they're flying in from out of town or wherever. And we're trying to do that because if you're in a career, I don't know how far you want to stay disconnected as an employee. Like there's more to work than money, right? There's satisfaction, sense of accomplishment. You meet people, you network. I'm not saying family's not number one and you don't want to get off work at 5 or 6 and go home and be with family, but it's a balance. And everybody writes about that work-life balance, but it is tricky to keep people engaged. It's a great question.
Yeah, I think it's that work-life balance but another thing remote work has done too, I think, has allowed people to show more of their whole selves, right? It's that integration of because how do you avoid that when you're on camera and your dog's running in the background or your kids? I mean, it's just people get much better visibility into people's, lives outside of work. So there's that connection point too. And I think people are maybe more open about their personal lives now, I think, based with remote work. But I think, to all of their points, it's a very deliberate kind of motion to try to make a connection, with employees.
I do wonder if careers are going to start looking different, though.
Yeah.
Do you know? I mean, I'm just when you think about your question about the gig economy and how people are kind of being their expertise is just needed in maybe smaller segments, and that could be their career. But being wed to a company like people used to be was often tied to also their health insurance and their community and where they lived, and I do think that is changing somewhat.
I think so.
Yeah.
I agree. I think lifestyle and some of those things are now shifting to be a little bit more important, People don't live to work, right? They work to live. That whole thing that I always hear when I go across the pond. But it's interesting. It's an interesting shift that's going on. And it is in that vein, right? It's 5 o'clock, baby.
But maybe it's a healthier shift, right? I mean, maybe people are working and they're doing things that they enjoy more and they're less trapped sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's positive. I really like the fact that your company's all remote, and you've mentioned a couple of you guys have mentioned about hiring people who start out remote.
Yeah.
And I'm all my guys left the office and went out, right? Nobody started remote. I haven't hired a college kid yet since this started. And so I wonder if they'll have a different perspective, if they will have work-life balance where they learn how to engage, because that engagement thing is a big problem on a variety of fronts, not just, their career is suffering or, productivity suffering from a boss view. It's part of the fabric.
Yeah, maybe they're isolated.
You're either part of the team or you're not.
Right.
It's important.
That's for sure.
And you don't have to be on-site or remote to not be part of the team. Even when you're not part of it.
Yeah, you
get back in the day when you're I don't fit in here.
Yeah.
You don't have to be, you know what I mean?
That happens in person too.
You just don't like me.
Determination.
Yeah. It does.
You guys, I'm going to flip the switch to something more of the opportunities and positives of it but I don't want to close this chapter out because this was kind of the bulk of it, right? This is what a lot of people wanted to talk about was the challenges and how do we overcome them. Does anyone else have anything that they want to discuss from a challenges perspective? You guys got elect, huh? All right. Let's talk about opportunities that you guys have seen. Opportunities and maybe some positives that you're whoa, whether it be efficiency or maybe someone's at a hiring, you got the whole globe now to pick from.
Yeah.
What are
best
some?
talent on the planet.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that I'm most excited about is now when we open roles, it's not geography based.
Yeah.
There are, I shouldn't say that, it's not wholesale geography based. If you're running a data center, you're there. But for most of the roles, it's now best talent on the planet.
And it's being where you want to be, not just, prior to this, my husband took a job in New York and I said, you should interview for that job, but I'm never moving to New York. And guess who moved to New York, you know, so I feel like we had to make that decision because that was a deal breaker for the company, is that we either were there in person every day or there was no offer. So I love that the pandemic really broke us of that, and that I can live here and live close to family. And like, to me, that's more valuable really than any of the trade-offs that might be somewhat negative, or, you know, something we need to work through and find a better balance for.
Yeah. How many of you are in hiring positions? Okay. And, you know, may I call you a digital nomad? You were in New York, and then I mean, we've seen this, right? Have any of you guys in hiring positions seen this? Or heck, you live here. Have you seen kind of that digital nomad, you know, the landscape change, where obviously we've seen an influx of people coming in, but has it affected your workplace? Has it affected, you know, it affected you obviously positively because you didn't have to live in New York anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, turns out I liked New York, but I was very happy to come closer to family. I know, I always feel bad.
Did you say have to live in New York? I had to live in New York.
Yeah, I know, I was not happy about it, but then it was great. But you know, it was good to be closer to family, but I will say, that's why I was asking about compensation, is because
I know it's a temporary.
it's a very hard case to make on why you should be making a salary that you would needing to live in a larger city. And that's oftentimes the trade-off.
We have, I feel like I'm constantly jumping in. We have a true digital nomad. So she does not have a house. Her and her husband are in an RV. And they have some kind of virtual, you guys ever heard of escapees? It's in like 5 states, like all the no tax states, right? Like South Dakota. And so you have your business or your presence, your mail goes there, and then you get an RV. You're like this subculture thing. And she's in this RV with some Starlink or something on top of her RV, and she's always parked for her work day. And I lost the bet, but she nails her work, but she's never in the same city for more than like a few weeks. And she's hit all the parks, she's been to all 50 states, and she's from the East Coast, and she's loving it, right? Saw the whole West, and that's what she truly is. She's in an RV, which I can't even imagine for more than like a week.
I think it's,
It's
they're
fascinating.
empowered, excited. That's what they want to go do. They're like, when people are happy, generally, I think, in their lives outside of work, that usually translates, I think, to how they perform at work too. So as long as, and I think you have a really good point, as long as like results are being met, because that's really important, then, just from my own perspective, it doesn't matter to me where somebody's located. Time zones that's a thing to navigate, but other than that.
We do like certain roles to be on site for the whole collaborative thing.
Yeah.
So we have one success story that I didn't see coming because I felt bad letting go. One younger guy that I really liked, he was in IT, and he had to go. His daughter had, I'm not going to say, I shouldn't say I suppose, but anyway, had a problem. She was a newborn, so they had to go to a specialist. They moved to Billings, and we're like, okay, fine, we got to tap out on this. He'll come back maybe. And we told him, we said, we'd love to have you here, but you go take care of what you got to take care of, right? Well, now it's been like 2 years, maybe 2.5. He's coming back. I'm like, holy cow, I did not see that one coming. Because we're growing the company, and he's a big part of that future, and he wants to be here with his team.
He wants to be here.
And they love the Flathead, so they're here.
Was he working remotely during that time that he was?
No, he was here.
Yeah.
And then he's worked remotely the
Oh,
whole
he has
time.
worked
He's with us the
Got
whole
it.
time.
Okay.
And at first as a boss, you're just sitting there going, oh man, here we go. This isn't gonna work, but it worked great.
And then you have his loyalty.
And then
Yeah.
he's coming back, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I think that trust, that empowerment, all of that, like, it goes a long way. I mean, it does for me as an employee.
We've
right?
had a couple
Yeah.
people go remote specifically for family-oriented issues.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
And every time it's worked out because they needed that.
right.
Rachel, you brought up something interesting about happy wife, happy life for me, but happy wherever you're at, happy life, you know, and that's a totally, I mean, I'm on the older side of the Zennial thing, but like, you know, there's that where it's like, if I hit my metrics and you'll let me live anywhere, I will work for you forever. Have you guys all seen that? Because I mean,
Well, that's what we're trying to build.
Yeah.
So what else do you do, right? You
Yeah.
gotta stay positive, you gotta work it.
and
Yeah.
you've lived it, haven't you? And-
Yeah, I just think there's no fighting it, really.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I think that is the future. I think that we're watching, at least in the legal industry, a lot of firms say like, you gotta come back. And people are really resisting it because they've proved that they don't have to be in the office every day.
I was going to ask you about recent trends. You know what I mean? Because there was the pandemic trends, there was the pre-pandemic trends, and now there's now trends, and this is kind of becoming life in case something crazy happens. Is that the
Our
hook?
Zoom is having issues,
All right.
so ignore any sound.
How ironic at a
remote work.
yeah, discussion.
Yeah, I was just gonna go back to your point about the successes and the positives of the remote work, because I've built a remote team, and we have 10 employees over the past 3 years, and we've been remote the whole time. But the companies that we work for are all tech startups. We're a startup, but we're an agency, so we're helping these companies do their hiring and things like that. But one of the main positives has been the talent that's been able to be discovered in all these other markets, right? For us, it was just the first year, just San Francisco, Seattle, and New York. But being able to build our team fully remote, but also find all of these software engineers for people in like Florida or Colorado or, you know, all of these kind of tier 2, tier 3 markets that were either overlooked or just historically didn't have the best software engineers in the world, are now people are either moving back home and working successfully there, or it's allowed a lot of people that didn't get that opportunity to even maybe interview to get that and to get quality jobs for companies that are based in these tech markets. So that for my team and the companies that we hire for is probably the biggest success.
What does everyone feel about the benefit? Okay, I say benefit, but I'm also one of the transplants. So I know we don't want people coming here, but beautiful places will be discovered eventually. Do we feel it's a benefit to the Valley to have people that maybe bring mind capital and experience? It sounds, you'd be an example of that.
From here, but
Okay, well, still sound very smart. You know, but people coming in here, is that a benefit? Does anyone feel like it's a benefit? Can we see a raise of hands of people who think it's a benefit?
Absolutely. Large companies benefit from the talent pool.
And as a local employer, I mean, has it been a benefit to have the influx of talent coming in that
Oh,
may
absolutely.
or may not have been able to come here
Absolutely.
before?
You're dependent on a handful of employers up until 24 months ago, so absolutely. I think it benefits everyone. I mean, a place like this is gonna grow. So when you open it up to where intellectual capital, you know, where people can come in that have great talent, I mean, that's pretty big. Because that was not our profile 24 months ago, right?
Yeah, I just saw a LinkedIn like connection or notice from someone else at my organization. They hired someone else she's out of Bozeman. Like there's more insight, you know, and I don't know, our Insight's a big company, but I connected with her. And so I love seeing that, right? It's like, it's great to see. I think it's encouraging to see.
I do too. And does anyone, and you don't have to raise your hand, and you don't have to comment if you don't want to, but is there an opposite to that? Maybe there is, okay.
In fact, a lot of employers are not able to get employees because they can't have housing.
Right.
And it is a huge problem, like, especially for like manufacturers, so they have to have people on site. And they just don't have anyone, they come and look at the job and they say, I can't live here. So,
Like they would take it otherwise,
Yes.
but it's the, yeah.
We've had that discussion before. And what, yeah, that's
I also
fair.
feel like you want to be here, you know, hopefully for the right reasons, but, you know, because you have a family here, you grew up here, or there's, you know, you appreciation for the things there are to do outside, but I do get a little frustrated sometimes when people move here and they don't have a connection to the space, and so then therefore they want to change it.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes, you know, they're like everything will evolve, but to come and be maybe frustrated about so many things. It's kind of missing the point.
Absolutely.
The housing's a big deal. I think it's a much bigger deal than remote work.
I used to live in Bend, Oregon before I moved here,
Yeah.
and it was the #1 remote work location far before the pandemic occurred. And generally, there was two negative sides to it. One, that the people that were working remote generally weren't involved in the community to the same extent that other people might. They weren't plugged in, they were more autonomous, they might make friends with their neighbors and that sort of thing, but perhaps not be as engaged in some of the community kind of activities. And also the employers themselves, oftentimes we think of employers, but really in a town this size or the size of Bend, these are the leaders of your, they're sitting on your school board and your Boys and Girls Club and all these other organizations. Those business leaders aren't present in your community anymore. So they're not making those kinds of investments. And so you get this kind of individualized community, basically, that loses a little bit of its character. And then the other issues about people moving in and maybe being a little bit more selfish and not realizing the impacts that they make on the people who grew families there, and raised people in the area, and that kind of stuff. And having these other expectations, there are drawbacks. There's positive things too, but if you're asking drawbacks, there are. I witnessed that there for sure.
I think it's that community connection, I think, right? It's because if they're not going to a local workplace, right, and engaging that way, then how are they engaging,
They
right?
don't learn the local culture.
Right, and that's
how
really
things work there.
important. Yeah, that's really important. It's a great point.
One thing I neglected to do at the front end of our agenda that I would like to do now as we're kind of opening up the room more for conversation is to make sure that we get to know who all is here and present. And so maybe for those who weren't on the panel and haven't gotten to introduce yourselves yet, if you could just tell us your name, who you work for, where you're from. We can just go around the room. Christy, do you want to start for us?
Christy Cummings Dawson with Montana West Economic Development here in Kalispell.
And Dean, also with Montana West Economic Development here in Kalispell.
Hi, I'm Joe Underwriter. I'm with Glacier Bank.
Mike Smith, Market President for Glacier Bank. We might have a handful of remote workers, so we're just curious to learn more about it. We really haven't had that need to go there yet. Deb, I'll let you take it from there.
And I'm Deb Broughton, also with Glacier Bank in Human Resources.
I'm Bill Mosley, I'm the CEO of GL Solutions.
Mickey Davis, I'm the business analyst at GL Solutions.
Cody Branson, I'm the ops manager at GL Solutions.
Will Richards, I'm with Accelerate Montana.
Teresa Fisher with LC Staffing. Amy Slama, LC Staffing. Christina.
Ian Gillespie, CEO of Talent Edge.
Chris Albert with Nomad GCS.
Ryan Sappett, I'm the CEO of Mingo. It's a manufacturing productivity software.
Kelly Sappett, I do operations for Mingo.
John Romano, I'm CEO of Disaster Central.
We will jump back. Melissa?
Melissa Paulson with the Alliance Communications Coordinator.
Miriam Applied Materials.
Jeff Johnson, Services and Curves. I formed a CAD camp services company. I do a lot of CNC programming for CNC machines and stuff like that. I'm all by myself.
I'm Sean Malloy with Terranact Corporation. We're out of Missoula, but I'm working remotely out of Lakeside, just having returned from overseas, so looking forward to getting more involved here in the community.
Clint, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Clint Eckert, I'm with Skyball. I'm just snapping shots at you guys today.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thanks for coming, you guys, first of all. We want to answer all your questions and continue this dialogue. I did have one, though, because we haven't brought it up yet, is tools, systems, processes, but Kelly, you talked specifically about certain tools, and we'd love to get your guys' feedback, too, if there's tools we haven't heard of, but do you have kind of your go-to tools that you've
I was
seen?
going to say, I was joking with someone, I don't know who it was before, like, we are not a best practice in tools. We have way too many tools, so that would be tip number one. Like,
You need a tool to manage your tools.
Yes. Pick tools, but not so many that all your employees are like, okay, with this group I have to use that tool, with that group I have to use this tool. Zoom, we are huge Zoom fans, so that has worked very, very well. I would say Slack is probably the second go-to that we use quite a bit. And that has saved our inboxes because you can have kind of the chit-chat dialogue without having to send an email about everything. So we love Slack. And then I would say Rike for project management, especially with a remote team. That's helped a lot with just keeping our projects on track and knowing where things are and final documents and approvals. So I would say those three have been the best.
Greg, do you have any, whether it's tools or maybe even like how you can reconfigure your office to kind of, I like the idea of saying this is your home, like this is like having kind of some
base,
kind of a sandbox around it.
We're open floor plan, and I think probably, we've got similar tools, so I don't really have a tool response, but I would say the points I made about how much energy we have in the team approach and how much structure we have there, it yields huge benefits. It's the reason we grow. We actually, it's a natural way to leverage your human capital. Mm-hmm. And for that just to go, I would say that's all I got.
Good deal.
Yeah, extremely fast internet. I know anyone trying to work from home without really fast internet, really dead in the water.
If you have a resource for that, I would love that.
Yeah. So we have those things that I don't know what they're called, but we can talk after this.
Right.
They try to, I think, expand the reach of it, but it's, my company uses Signal a lot, and what I like about it is that everything goes away, and so it doesn't build up. Can you tell that I work for a legal company?
Yeah.
Everything
Like
disappears.
We don't get that often from legal. Yeah.
But it's nice because you can have a conversation, you can decide something or whatever, but then it's just like it's it's just gone, which weirdly is kind of probably just a mental thing, but it just feels cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You have no tools, right? Except for a whole set of tools.
No, we use, from a collaboration standpoint, we use Microsoft Teams, and Teams is I'm probably biased because I use it, but I just think it's a really strong collaboration tool, and that combined with everything that, Office 365 has, and with Teams, it saves on email. You can chat in Teams, you can save files in Teams, you can project manage in Teams, you can do event registration. It's pretty robust from that perspective. And it's also I think it's user friendly. So I don't want to do a Teams commercial, but I like Teams. So but there's tons of good collaboration tools. That's just one that I use today and like a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, I suppose you can do everything. So it is kind of like Slack. It is kind of like.
It is.
Right.
It's very similar. And then we run all of our remote meetings through there. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I like it, and that the app on your phone's great with it too. So yeah. All good things. Yeah.
Anybody else have some tools that they suggest that we're missing? You want to go, and then we'll go to.
I'd just like to throw this out of the question. Any ideas on CRMs for full commission Salesforce software?
I have HubSpot is great. Yeah.
We have HubSpot,
Yeah.
and we've only had it about 6 or 8 months, but we're fully integrating it into our enterprise platform, and we love it. And we've used Salesforce for 3 or 4 years before that. So yes, I would concur. HubSpot, worth checking out.
Yeah.
I have a question for the group. Can I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Them or us?
So, our guys like technology, right? This seems like a technology group pretty much. Has anybody tried anything at all that's more of a virtual room, right? Like Microsoft Mesh or any of these VR goggles? Or has anybody played with that? Has anybody spent the money and tried?
Our business has, not me personally, so we support globally applied materials manufacturers around the world, right?
Right.
So we use the Microsoft product, virtual reality equipment, and I had interns this summer building instructions for our tools that go out to our customer engineers, with the customers using the apps, and they just play around in the digital space with each other and say. So that's the future of our support, really,
Cool.
is send a California GPS engineer, global product support engineer out to Taiwan, we're gonna call them in VR and show them what's going on in the tool.
Yeah, makes sense. Did it work okay?
Oh yeah, I think we have a lot of work. There are different divisions in Applied that have this skill more defined. We're just beginning for our product suite. So it's working.
Yeah, we tried it a little bit, but you know, it seemed still.
Yeah, it's, you know, the biggest thing I think is not whether or not the tool works, it's whether or not the customers accept it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But as far as success on, did it solve the problem and were you able to solve the problem? Yeah, it's proving itself.
That's awesome. Thank you.
We had some tool suggestions over here. I saw a bunch of hands go up. Yeah.
We implemented a Trello board, and that's been really great for onboarding all the employee resources, training, and to just, you know, I think for years we had everything out like in the cloud or on OneDrive, and so as you're onboarding new people and bringing them on, you're realizing, oh wait, you have to go here to get that, or you have to go here, and so just creating one space that belongs to the employees is very user-friendly, easy to get to whatever they need when they need it, and they have access to it. So whether they're at home or across the state or in the office, they all have access to it. And it makes it really easy to update stuff like staff lists, anything that's changing, which is, you know, different from Teams, which is more of a conversation, but this is truly that employee resource, and they love it, and our managers love it, because they know where to go find stuff right away, and before it just felt like it was all over. Yeah.
We've used that. That is a great tool too. Yeah.
Does it serve a project management function too?
A little bit. A little bit. It's like a Kanban board.
Yeah.
But very visual. And,
Okay.
but more robust than just flat.
Cool. That's great.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've always loved Trello. I'm on a project now where we're using Notion, which is pretty good. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah, we use Notion too.
Yeah, I don't know what I like better now.
Yeah, but kind of to your point, sometimes it gets to be like too many tools. Like we almost like tried some and maybe need to.
Yeah.
Because some of them serve so many different functions that, you know, you don't really need.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think finding one that has, well, yeah, you have, you know, your tools for your tech stack for your different kind of aspects of the business. But I think one thing that helped us a lot being remote was finding, whether it was like our HR, you know, solution, Workday or something, but something that has a anonymous, some sort of a feedback tool. Would highly recommend that, as, you know, with the remote team, having the opportunity for those people that don't want to speak up in meetings and things like that to have a comfortable avenue for that, for feedback for leadership or whoever it is. I know Workday has one, I'm sure others do, but some sort of anonymous or otherwise feedback tool is helpful.
That's a great point.
Has anyone here used Workplace, the Facebook tool? No? Okay.
Anyone?
No. I worked for a law firm that, in the spirit of culture, decided to roll out Facebook's workplace tool called Workplace that is basically Facebook for work. And it went exactly as you would expect. Shut it down.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
Yeah, I don't know. You're friending certain people. Yeah.
So that was a Misery Loves Company kind of thing. I think it was, yeah.
One thing I forgot to mention, one other thing is part of, I was just thinking through tools, part of Teams, and I think you guys nodded, you guys Teams as well. Microsoft Viva is a tool within Teams. It's a separate tool, but combined. What I like about that is it provides kind of workplace and employee analytics. But so you get a report at the end of the week that says, hey, you've spent X amount of time in meetings, you spent X amount of time focusing. It blocks focus time on your calendar proactively, and you can use it in all sorts of different ways. But when you talk about remote work, I do find that helpful, because sometimes I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's a lot of meetings, right? Or how do I kind of taper that down? So that's another one. Anyway, okay.
Now, just being on the marketing and sales kind of side of things, for customer engagement, we haven't talked about that. We've been talking a lot about employees and stuff, but as far as customer engagement, do you guys leverage video tools, and not just Zoom or not just, you know, webinar type of tools, but, you know, for follow-up or for maybe prospecting or for different things? I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear, we haven't talked about those kind of tools. Does anyone have any suggestions that they absolutely love? And if they could get credit for it right now, a little check would float from the sky that you'd be like, I love this tool.
One that I love that's not video is Calendly.
Calendly?
Yeah. For scheduling meetings, like you can just take like, here's 9 times that I'm available and stick it in the email and somebody can just click on it and book a meeting through or pick another time. It's the greatest thing ever. From marketing and sales perspective, like customer service and success, I love it. You couldn't try that for my goal.
I love it too. I vouch for that one. It's a
On the
good
video
one.
side, I like Soapbox. I know people like Zoom. Soapbox is part of Wistia. So
Yeah.
basically you can record a quick video, you can do a screen share. So like if you're, you got on a call with a prospect or something, we sell software, and, they were interested in the feature that you could demo, you can make a quick video, 30 seconds with your face there. You're nice to set up.
What's that one called?
Soapbox.
Soapbox.
Yeah. And there's another one that is called Loom. They're kind of the market leader, similar.
We use Hippo Video for cold outreach, like client development. It's basically a sales call, but a person talking versus an email.
Do you feel like it works better?
Not really.
So
but it's better than just sending emails. So yeah, it's something we work into our kind of process. But
working in talent, do you guys ever leverage LinkedIn? I mean, I love LinkedIn, but like LinkedIn's video tools for kind of the same deal, or even voice recording. Have you leveraged those at all?
We haven't used the video outreach through LinkedIn. I'm not sure how that goes. We use other tools outside of LinkedIn most of the time, just because it's pretty saturated. But I know they have good solutions. We just haven't used them.
There's this other one that we use for, it's video. It's really cool. I forgot the name until now. It's called Video Ask. And basically you record these little snippets. They're like 30 to 60 seconds. And then you can have people choose their own adventure through it. So like if you're trying to get across, explain your pricing or how something works, they can drill down into what's interesting to them and then listen to somebody. Like we have them on our website who's been talking about the product and how it works. It's really effective. And then you can collect emails and phone numbers and stuff to block certain parts of it without them giving you some information. It's pretty cool. And apparently you can send them in LinkedIn, instant messages.
What's that one
can you
called?
see what they were interested in?
Yeah,
That's
Video
cool.
Ask.
Video Ask.
Ask. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I've heard a lot of good things about Dub, which is real good for outreach on LinkedIn and that sort of thing, video snippets.
It's called Dub.
Dub, D-U-B-B.
D-U-B-B.
Dub.
Remember that.
What about for capture? Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's
I'm just
okay.
curious.
Just-
Anyone uses tools
Maybe
for?
gonna phase into a conclusion and transition into a
All right, here I better stand up to inspire all of you. That you can conclude if you'd like. Well, how much time do we have? Are we like?
it's flexible. We kind of built in a little bit of space so that people could head down the hallway. If anybody does need a bio break, if you go straight down this hallway out here and there's a sign that points you to Senator Dane's office, the restrooms are also that way. So if anybody does need a break, and then I see we have our bartender here and our food. So as we kind of wrap up the conversation, feel free to transition out and grab a beverage. But I think we can have a nice, wrap up here. If people have any final thoughts or questions, that would be entirely perfect too.
Yeah. Is there anybody that's like, man, I haven't had a chance to talk because spicy little Italian over here has been talking the whole time. Is anybody have anything they're like?
Did you get to say what you were going to say?
Oh, I was just going to ask if anyone uses tools to capture client testimonials that you'd recommend. Like videos or, you know what I mean? Like to, at scale, capture client testimonials. I was just wondering if anyone has used one that they like.
With that Video Ask tool, you can respond with a video. So like if you're clicking through it and you want to ask a question, you can type into it, but then you could also respond with video. Some people use it for recruiting.
Oh, that's interesting.
That may be an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question for the, I'm curious, Christina, the team from, is it economic development?
Emily.
I'm curious, are you hoping to attract more remote workers to Montana in general? I mean, is that a goal of the Alliance and your company?
Depends on who you ask.
No, I mean, I think you covered a lot of the pros and cons of that. You're bringing in, great people, and even if you're bringing in a remote worker, maybe their other half or other family member or whatever will become a local, in-person employee. A lot of people aren't moving solely by themselves, so the remote worker could bring with them a lot. And I think, a lot of people who are new to the area have gotten involved in the community. So you're bringing that extra brain power and just that extra manpower of people to do things that are outside of work. So me personally, giving purely my own opinion, I think there's a huge value to bringing in those people. But again, there is sometimes the downside of, people who aren't filling local employment need, but filling local housing, those who aren't involved in the community. So I think it's a mixed bag, like everything, but I think that it comes with a lot of pluses if you're attracting the right people. How you filter the right people, I don't know, but.
I don't know if we are specifically trying to attract remote workers, but I do know like those people are here and we're trying to kind of bring them into the fold, and we will talk about this during the remarks at our reception, but with you, Rachel, and with David, we're starting a local chapters, program for our High Tech Business Alliance to allow more people locally to have more opportunities to connect, because with our staff resources and whatnot, we have one major reception in the Flathead Valley per year. We have a few happy hours, but with local chapters, we could have something every month or, much more frequently. And so we're kind of going in that direction and hoping that we can pull in more of those people that have come to Montana. One very cool thing I've seen as I travel the state is a lot of Montanans have been able to come home. So I was in Havre, for example, and met a PhD computer scientist who was able to move back to Havre with his wife because they could take their jobs remote. And so he's now back home where he came from. I've met folks that moved home to the family ranch, and one partner in the marriage is running the ranch, and the other one is the CTO of a tech startup in Bozeman, and they can do it from their tiny town remotely in Montana. So there's some very cool things happening with this remote work trend that I think we want to take advantage of. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of our local tech employers have their eye on those remote workers to be like, hey, wouldn't you like to, have an office or people locally that you could connect with? So it's a pool of talent too that we can tap.
That's awesome. Well, with that, I think we've done it. Was this valuable? Did we do a good job? Yeah, you guys were super engaging. I appreciate it. So let's give a round of applause to the panelists. And Christina, thank you so much for pulling us all together. Appreciate it. And of course, Glacier Bank, and who just came in from Missoula. Let's go for Glacier Bank at Endpoint. Thanks for making this possible, guys.